Thank you very much, MC. It's so wonderful to see so many of you coming to attend this debate. We have great panelists here in front of you, and you can be guaranteed that they're interested in a very interesting debate as well. We look forward to your participation. So I would like to welcome, this is the second speech debate for 2017 on the Sustainable Development Goal and key development issues. Thank you all for taking time out this Monday evening to join us. For those who are here for the first time, the speakers debate focuses on the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, SDGs. The adoption of SDGs is an important national undertaking. These are not simply goals of the United Nations, but globally agreed to goals and targets that UN member countries, including Fiji, have extended to. A continuous challenge for Parliament is how it can better engage with the SDGs. The speakers' debates are one way for Parliament to raise awareness of these issues. This is one of a few open national forums where the SDGs are being discussed. The speakers' debate series provides a platform for national discussion on the SDGs and on key development issues. Their debates bring together diverse opinions, and this will lead to rigorous discussion on those important issues. I urge us all to continue to discuss these important goals, as these are not simply goals of governments, policymakers, or international organizations, but are goals that affect all of us as individuals and communities. I will encourage people to take an interest in the SDGs, as they are universal goals and have implications for everyday life, now and beyond. Health and non-communicable diseases, NCDs, including diabetes and heart disease, are increasingly being discussed in Fiji. NCDs impose a huge burden on Fijian society, both socially and financially. NCDs have reached crisis levels in Fiji, and the Pacific are the leading cause of premature death. Unfortunately, many of these deaths occur in the most economically productive segment of our population. Many of these deaths are preventable. NCDs have been declared a health and development crisis since 2011. But are we really responding as if it were a crisis? Is there coherence between different policies and legislation shaping our development in health? Is it time for stronger actions to address this crisis? Is it time for Fiji to toughen rules on junk food and drinks to tackle diabetes and heart diseases? This is the question for today's debate. Before I go into the details of the format of today's event, I would like to acknowledge the continued support and partnership of the UNDP and the project donors, which has enabled Parliament to raise the profile of the SDGs in Fiji. And these project donors include the governments of Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and also the EU. The format for the debate will be that I will introduce each panelist, and then each will speak on the topic for up to 7 minutes, to allow plenty of time for questions and debate. I will be strict to the time limits tonight, as I am in the Parliament chamber. We will then open up the floor to questions from the audience. The order of speaking has been drawn by lots, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first panelist.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bulavinaka, and a very good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you all this afternoon. The topic before us, ladies and gentlemen, is it time for Fiji to toughen rules on junk food and drinks to tackle diabetes and heart disease crisis? I'd like to answer the question after my presentation, but at the offset, please allow me to say that given the fact that Fiji faces a growing burden of non-communicable diseases, including diabetes and heart disease, I think this forum is very timely and apt, and the attendance of you ladies and gentlemen makes it equally important that we all are part and parcel of this problem, and we all need to go forward in trying to find forward-looking solutions rather than pushing blames on whatever organizations are responsible for that. If we look at Fiji, ladies and gentlemen, every year we have 6,000 health-related deaths, and alarmingly 80% of those deaths are related to NCDs. And I'm sure all of you know, one of the major contributors to that problem is increase in numbers of our fellow Fijians who are either overweight or obese. A survey carried out in 2011 found that overall 67%, or 2/3 of those surveyed, were either overweight or obese. And amongst women, 3/4 were overweight and obese. The link between weight gain and NCDs are well established. For example, studies have shown that being even slightly overweight can increase the risk of diabetes, and the risk is 5 times. And being seriously obese increases it 60 times. People who are often overweight or obese are also at a greater risk of heart disease and strokes, certain types of cancer, diseases of liver, and problems with bones and joints. Weight gain, ladies and gentlemen, happens when the amount of energy we put into our bodies through food and drink is more than the amount of energy we use through various forms of physical activity. If energy in exceeds energy out, we gain weight. If energy out exceeds energy in, we lose weight. That's as simple. Many people seek to blame so-called junk food and drink for the growth in overweight and obesity in the modern world. The argument goes on to say that if we stop people from consuming such products, they are less likely to put on excessive weight and less likely to end up with diabetes, heart disease, and other NCDs. That sounds pretty straightforward, a very straightforward argument. But the reality is more complex, ladies and gentlemen. First, we need to be exactly clear what we mean by junk food and drink. People typically associate the term with the famous golden arches or global brands of carbonated soft drinks. It is true that many of the products are high in fat or sugar, all of which can contribute to weight gain and NCDs more generally. One can of popular cola drink contains more than 10 teaspoons of sugar, which is more than 1.5 times the total daily sugar intake recommended by the World Health Organization. High levels of salt in some products are also linked to heart diseases. But fast foods and fizzy drinks marketed by multinationals aren't the only culprit. Takeaways, roadside stalls who often sell deep-fried foods. One samosa may contain more fat than a Big Mac burger. Freshly squeezed, unsweetened orange juice contains more calories than some brands of beer. Recent research in Australia found that some packets of instant noodle contains more salt than a Big Mac and can provide up to a quarter of the recommended daily energy intake. The Australian Consumers Association recommends that for most people who aren't engaging in vigorous exercise over long periods, sports drinks are an unnecessary expense and provide unnecessary salts and kilojoules. So a simple goal of toughening the rules on junk foods could be more complicated than we think. Second, assuming we choose to take on the challenge, what can we actually do? Banning junk foods overnight is clearly unrealistic. It would involve complex legislation and create all sorts of problems in defining what should and what shouldn't be allowed. Last year, Fiji increased the excise payable on locally produced carbonated soft drinks and sweetened beverages from 10 cents per litre to 30 cents per litre. That is in addition to the charges that were previously levied on such products when imported. It is frequently suggested that similar measures to impose additional taxes on junk food could help to change dietary habits. But such measures could also be seen as unfair or inequitable if they focus solely on products associated with certain high-profile global brands. There are plenty of local produced goods which are equally undesirable from a dietary point of view and should logically also be covered by higher taxes. They include not only locally produced fast foods but also staples such as white bread and soft drinks. Concerns have also been raised that tax increases can impact disproportionately on the poor and as a result increase social inequities. Restrictions on advertising, ladies and gentlemen, especially advertising aimed at children, have been introduced in some countries. Experience from Quebec in Canada suggests that a ban on advertising to children under 13 had reduced their consumption of fast food and led to the province having both the lowest childhood obesity rate and the highest rate of fruit and vegetable consumption in Canada. But in fact, Quebec has had a long-standing ban on all advertising aimed at children, so the issue of ruling particular foods and drinks in or out of the scope has been avoided. In the UK, the advertising industry itself has established rules that will ban advertising of food and drinks with high fat, salt, or sugar content in non-broadcast media, such as websites, targeted at under 16, with effect from 1st July 2017. The industry will be using a system of nutrient profiling developed by the British Department of Health to determine what food and drinks are and not to be covered by the rule. While advertising bans or restrictions may have a part to play, they need to be carefully formulated to ensure they are well targeted, and also to take account of the fact that a great deal of advertising is now delivered online and via social media rather than through more conventional TV, radio and posters. On a more positive note, ladies and gentlemen, measures to improve access to healthy foods, to make them more attractive and to help consumers make healthy choices have also been shown to be effective. Our own Ministry of Education has launched policies which encourage access to healthy foods in school canteens, while the Ministry of Health and Medical Services has recently produced similar guidelines for all government ministries that provide meals to their staff and visitors. Food labelling using traffic lights or providing nutrition information in easily understood formats or labels can also be effective. Ladies and gentlemen, such measures typically require cooperation on the part of retailers and wholesalers, but there is no reason why that should not be forthcoming. It is possible to envisage a situation where offering consumers access to healthy, nutritious food and drinks become a source of competitive advantage. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, recalling the introductory comments about balance between energy intake and energy expenditure, the impact of unhealthy food and drinks can be reduced by engaging in more active lifestyle. Ministry of Health, Madam Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen, our vision is to empower people to take ownership of their health, and I believe the way forward is for individuals to be more responsible and for all of us to really engage into fruitful discussions as to how we need to save and empower the lives of our ordinary Fijians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Honourable Minister, Honourable Member of Parliament, panellists. Non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and heart disease are the main cause of premature death globally, and Fiji is no exception. One of the main risk factors for this group of NCDs are poor diets. A healthy diet is not just about maintaining a healthy weight, although of course that is important. Poor diets are those which contain too much fat, sugars and salt and are low in key nutrients like iron and vitamins, and key food groups like fruits and vegetables. So generally we don't talk about junk food, we talk about less healthy and healthier food items. So the healthier food items are those that are lower in fat, sugars and salt and contain plenty of the other key nutrients. Dietary behaviours are shaped by many factors, including personal choice and the food environment. And as such, improving population diets will only be achieved via multiple sustained interventions. Education about healthy diets is only helpful if a person can afford and access these foods and is able to, is less able to afford the less healthy foods. The healthier choices need to be the easier choices so that anyone can have access to a healthy diet at any time. In order to achieve a healthier food environment, a number of measures will be needed. Globally and regionally, based on the available evidence, key recommended interventions have been identified, which include both policy, regulatory and other measures. Within these recommendations, it is clear that the diets of children in particular may need focus. The recent policy for school canteens is an excellent example of a stronger approach to control the food supply to children within the school grounds. Of course, it will not change completely everything eaten by children in Fiji, and some children may leave the school grounds or bring their own less healthy options from home. But paired with other interventions, such as education through the school curriculum, will help to improve the diets of children. There may be scope for similar settings-based policies, such as in workplaces. These might include ensuring the availability of drinking water or healthier food choices in the canteen. Among the other policy-based approaches, WHO has recommended that countries consider controls on the marketing of food and beverages to children to reduce their exposure to the advertising of these less healthy food and drink options. Children are a particularly vulnerable group to advertising messages, and as the majority of advertising is about less healthy options, their exposure to these types of messages has been found to contribute to poor dietary choices. Reducing their exposure to advertising and marketing can therefore assist along with education to ensure that they make healthier choices. WHO has developed a criteria for how to classify the foods that should be included in such controls. WHO has also recommended controls on marketing and advertising of complementary foods and drinks, so-called formula milks and baby foods, for infants and young children, to protect very young children and ensure that breastfeeding and infant feeding practices are optimal in these critical early years. There is a strong link between infant feeding practices and later risk of NCDs, along with other health issues. These recommended controls on advertising are not about limiting supply or availability, only about ensuring that there is no promotion of these products and no misleading messaging. Parents and families need to be aware of the value of breastfeeding and good infant feeding practices for their baby's health. Other measures to protect breastfeeding practices may also be warranted, such as support for breastfeeding women in the workplace. Given the challenge of accessing a healthy diet at an affordable price globally, WHO has also recommended that taxation-based approaches be considered for ensuring that healthier food items are more affordable and less healthy items are less affordable. For example, as was mentioned just now, taxing sugary sweet beverages to encourage shifts to healthier drinks. While some taxation-based approaches are in place currently on a number of food items in Fiji, there may be scope for further strengthening of these to encourage shifts to healthier diets, thus overall making healthier choices the easier choices. At the same time, increasing the supply and access to local foods is critical, and there is a need for continuation of the current efforts which are encouraging home and commercial production and supporting access to markets for farmers and consumers. Making a healthy choice also requires the availability of good information and knowledge. This includes food labelling, which shows the content of foods. Fiji already has regulations which require nutrition labelling of processed foods, and ongoing education is critical so that consumers can actually understand these labels, along with continued effort at enforcing these regulations to ensure that labels are accurate. At the same time, Fiji is also considering developing a more simple, straightforward front and pack label, which will assist consumers to make easier choices without having to read the whole details of the nutrient information panel. Overall, improving diets is complex and will take many interventions over a period of time. It is critical that alongside education and awareness raising, that some policy or regulatory approaches are also implemented and well enforced. Given the growing rates of obesity and NCDs in children and adults in Fiji, additional action is needed to improve diet, and this will require support from across sectors and throughout the population. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, my fellow panelists, honorable members, distinguished guests, and students. Is it time for Fiji to toughen rules to tackle junk food, drinks towards NCD prevention? Our Fiji status shows Fiji currently faces a wide array of issues due to high incidence of NCDs. Obesity is a serious public health problem that needs urgent action. 80% of all deaths in Fiji reported in 2002 were due to NCDs. The NCD STEPS survey revealed that percentage of those who have drank alcohol in the last 12 months increased from 21.6 to 30.6%. Percentage of those who are overweight increased from 23.6 to 32.1%. Percentage with raised blood sugar pressure, from 140 to 90 milligrams of mercury increased from 24.2 to 31%. Our people are dying early. Our children are increasingly becoming obese. The rise of NCD has been driven primarily by four major risk factors: tobacco use, physical inactivity, the harmful use of alcohol, and unhealthy diets. The epidemic of NCDs poses devastating health consequences of individual families and communities, and threatens to overwhelm health systems. The socio-economic costs associated with NCDs make the prevention and control of this disease a major problem, major development imperative for the 21st century. WHO mission is to provide leadership and the evidence base for international action on surveillance, prevention and control of NCDs, and urgent government action is needed to meet global targets to reduce the burden of NCDs. The NCD risk policy regulatory intervention, we have got Pure Food Act, Food Safety Act, National Tobacco Control Regulation, National School Canteen Guideline, National Food Nutrition Policy for Schools, NCD Strategic Plan available. Unfortunately, enforcement and monitoring of these need to be elevated. The implementation and public health and NCD, the non-communicable diseases are increasingly responsible for serious health and economic burdens to governments around the world. Most NCDs in all countries stem from risk factors, including tobacco use, harmful use of alcohol, overconsumption of saturated fat, sugar and salt, and lack of physical activity. One way for government to respond to the growing burden of NCD is through the use of public health law in order to reduce exposure of their population to these risk factors. There are many effective ways in which public health law can be utilized to influence these risk factors. This may include litigation against industry, advertising or marketing restrictions, or taxation or pricing restrictions, all of which have proven remarkably effective in reducing risk factors. However, it may be politically difficult or unfeasible for individual local governments to pursue these types of legislation on their own. Legislation is one key tool to address these risk factors and determinants. While traditionally public health law has addressed issues of communicable diseases, a changing global burden of disease means that in recent decades, it has also been used to address non-communicable disease. There is a broad spectrum of ways in which public health law can address the determinants of non-communicable diseases, such as multi-sectoral engagement and the reduction of health inequalities. The first such option is legislation requiring health impact assessments, tools that help decision makers identify the public health consequences of proposals that potentially affect health. A second involves imposing a statutory duty on a range of bodies to address the reduced health inequalities. The third is the use of legislation to bring about a renewed focus on prevention of ill health, both within and outside the health sectors. Fourthly, the use of legislation to strengthen community action around health protection and health improvement. On law enforcement evidence, there is a substantial evidence of success of preventive intervention. There is a case from Finland, North Carolina province, where is a policy focus on healthy diet, exercise, and reduction of smoking was implemented in the early 1970s. Between 1972 and 2006, North Carolina witnessed an 85% decrease in annual mortality rate from coronary heart disease. More recently, in New York City, a 5-year-old health department regulation banning trans fats has reduced the consumption of trans fat amongst fast food customers from about 3 grams to 0.5 grams per purchase, showing also that local health regulation can significantly influence public consumption. In concluding, non-communicable diseases are still a growing problem in Fiji. Fiji budgetary allocation of this program continues to increase. There is progress in terms of building commitment, but lack of monitoring of strategies and implementation of planned activities to tackle NCDs are still issues of concern. Thank you.
Well, Vinaka, I was actually waiting to hear what else you had to say about that guy. Good afternoon. I would like to formally acknowledge our Honourable Speaker and our Honourable Ministers and special guests, as well as the media and you, the public, for being here today. I bring the apologies of the Coca-Cola Amatil Fiji Managing Director, Roger Hare, who is out of the country at present and therefore unable to join us today, but he sends his regards. It's a privilege for me to be here and representing Coca-Cola Amatil Fiji. I applaud the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji for taking this initiative and asking the question, is it time for Fiji to toughen rules on junk food and drink to tackle diabetes and heart disease? Firstly, we know that our people in our communities are suffering from health problems. These are real issues that need real solutions. Secondly, finding solutions can be made all the more difficult if we struggle to understand exactly how that problem exists in the first place. So let's take a look at sugar and what Fijians are consuming to get their energy or sugar. The biggest misconception today is that sugary beverages are responsible for diabetes and poor health. Just 5% of our total energy intake in Fiji comes from sugar and sweets. Carbonated colas and lemonades in Fiji contributed only 2.85% of the total amount of sugar consumed per person. This translates to less than 1 gram a day. The World Health Organization recommended maximum daily intake as of 2015 is 25 grams of sugar, which is 6 teaspoons of sugar per day. You know what? We need good, solid, unbiased data and research that will help us to really understand where we derive the other 95% of energy and calories in our diets. Some are pointing to a sugar tax as the only way forward and the only answer to a healthy society. We all know that is not the case. A few places where a soft drinks tax has been introduced has seen a reduction in soft drinks consumed, yet obesity rates continue to climb. Why then would that be the answer? On average, Fijians only drink or purchase 750 mils of sugary beverages per person per week. That's just 1 1/4 of our 600 mil pack. And in fact, research shows that Fijians are already changing their beverage purchasing behaviours. They're drinking more no-sugar soft drink varieties along with bottled water. At Coca-Cola Amatil Fiji, we are investing heavily in promoting our low and no sugar drinks to try to encourage and shape beverage choices here. We also take our responsibility as a good corporate citizen very seriously, and in addition to the proactive policies we already have in place, such as our reformulations to reduce sugar content from many of our beverages, we need to do more. We believe that the best way forward is for the industry to work closer with government, consumer groups, regulatory authorities and others to help find the best solutions. Marginalising the beverage industry alone is counterproductive to finding better solutions. There's no silver bullet, we know that, but a lot of honest, transparent engagement from interested parties, along with lots of collaboration, is what's needed. I would like to invite government, industry, health groups and consumer groups to engage with us. Let's work on this together to find the best outcome for our communities. After all, that's what's important. So, we understand that the responsibility of health issues affecting our communities doesn't come from sugary beverages alone. Where is the main problem coming from? And for that matter, what is deemed to be junk food? Is it chocolate, lollies, ice cream, or even fried food? Because we are recognised, Coca-Cola Amatil, as category leaders, we appreciate that we have a responsibility to lead engagement and actively participate in dialogue. At Amatil Fiji, we appreciate that too much sugar and excess kilojoules or calories are not good for anyone. Essentially, we have a low or no sugar beverage option for every occasion, and we are continuing to innovate with natural sugar alternatives like stevia. We will continue to work hard to become a more helpful and credible partner in the fight against NCDs. Thank you for allowing us this time to talk on health issues we're facing today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and may I express again my sincere gratitude for the privileged invitation to address this esteemed forum. If I may begin my 7 minutes by providing the following backdrop. The NCD Roadmap Report of 2014 that was prepared for the Joint Economic Forum and the Pacific Health Ministers meeting had recommended 4 key strategies for inclusion in every Pacific country's NCD roadmap. Number 1, strengthening tobacco control. Number 2, strengthening policies on food and drink products that are directly linked to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and NCDs. Number 3, improving efficiency and impact of the existing health dollar by reallocating scarce health resources to targeted primary and secondary prevention of NCDs, and especially high-burden NCDs such as cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And number 4, strengthening the evidence base for better investment planning and program effectiveness to ensure interventions work as intended and provide value for money. My colleagues have deliberated on the relevant existing frameworks, and I see that I will only best contribute to this discussion from the angle of how academia is currently addressing and could strengthen its contribution to the topic on debate today. As the strategy number 4 that I highlighted before, strengthening the evidence base for better investment planning and program effectiveness. From the beginning of this year, the School of Public Health at FNU is now working closer with the Public Health Division of the Ministry of Health and aligning the research strengths of the school with the research priorities of the Ministry. As part of our own research deliverables that are derived from the school's annual work plan for 2017, we have identified 4 research themes and begun developing study protocols, such as knowledge, attitude, and practice related to lifestyle risk factors, factors that influence food choices, barriers or bottlenecks in the continuum of care for NCDs, especially diabetes, and the descriptive analysis of premature mortality due to NCDs and other related such topics. I also feel that in collaboration with partner research organizations abroad, we could investigate further the role of traditional medicines in the NCD picture. In 2013, the FNU CMNHS hosted the Pacific Islands Health Research Symposium where NCD was the theme. With the direct input from WHO, a Masters in Public Health in NCD program was developed. It was eventually approved by Senate of FNU in 2015, and the first batch enrolled semester 1 of 2016. They expected to graduate at the end of 2018. This was the academic response to the NCD crisis. And we hope that this capacity building for our health professionals also strengthens our deliverables in NCD care and also raises awareness for further development. The intakes on this current program are all health professionals. It is our intention to open the program, particularly to high school, primary school, and kindergarten teachers that meet the MQR, so that we arm teachers with the necessary NCD information so that they feel adequately empowered to affect the next generation. Because realistically speaking, pushing the behavior modification agenda with the current generation is almost a lost cause. Please do not feel offended. I will just cover two studies that I think would provide some relevant background to today's discussion in regards to taxes or legislations. The first study that was done in America, titled Taxing Junk Food to Counter Obesity. It examined the advantages and disadvantages of implementing a junk food tax as an intervention to counter increasing obesity in North America. They found that small excise taxes are likely to yield substantial revenue but are unlikely to affect obesity rates. High excise taxes are likely to have a direct impact on weight in at-risk populations but are less likely to be political, collateral, or sustainable. The second study, regressive effects, causes and consequences of selective consumption taxation. What they found is what the Department of Agriculture of the USA defines as urban neighborhoods and rural towns without ready access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food. On top of this, salt and sugar are the most popular preservatives. These are called food deserts. So, food can wait around until you are ready to eat it, unlike a banana or an apple slice, which is why it is very convenient to buy preserved food. You can eat whenever you need it, and convenience is an important aspect of food purchase. It's no wonder why many people make the choice to buy cheap, convenient food that might ultimately make them subject to chronic health problems. Intersectorally addressing the social determinants of health, I think, is important. With no local statistics to fall back on, I'm certain that the incidence of diabetes, ischemic heart disease, hypertension, and other NCDs in squatter settlements around Suva and around Fiji, and other informal dwelling places is higher than what the national figures are. The role of the social determinants of health in this NCD crisis are immense, and climate change will no doubt complicate the picture. Families living on the smaller islands of the Lau Group and other maritime communities are first going to be displaced because the soil to their plantations have had salt water leaching through. The stilts to their houses have eroded, putting them in danger. What follows is the urban drift, where you would find them settling in informal settlements with no formal source of income, water supply, proper sanitation, and therefore an increased risk for other health problems. To close, the current generation is struggling to keep up because changing our behavior and food choices does not happen overnight. But if we are persistent and we try our best to be good role models as child-rearing adults, we can instill those in the next generation of Fijians. I say child-rearing adults because the child is around not just the parents, but the process of child-rearing involves various adult figures in a child's growing life, such as the teachers and the supervisors. As an academic institution, I believe it is our role to strengthen the role of child-rearing adults in our community.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for initiating this discussion. And I think it's tremendously wonderful for the people of Fiji. I'd like to commend all the contributors to this discussion. It's actually an NCD tsunami sweeping through Fiji, and the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education are doing quite a bit to offset this. Now, when I was in school, I was taught that you can fool some people sometime, and you can fool some people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. We have seen a very good example of this.
Question, please.
The question is, well, the question is, we don't want to bury our head, ma'am, like an ostrich in the sand and refuse to see the reality on the ground. Now, my concern is with the school children. We conduct Coca-Cola games. Now, I refer you to the research carried out by the University of California and the hazards of health. I did a bit of research and reading on this. How Coca-Cola has been responsible for obesity and contribution to the ill health in the population in America and other parts of the world. Some countries have even banned. Now, the question I ask you is this, whether the Minister of Education is here or not, whether you people would be prepared to ban the Coca-Cola games in Fiji. Because it is brainwashing children to drink Coca-Cola. Have you witnessed Coca-Cola games? Now, would you have the courage to make the decision to ban the Coca-Cola game? Change the name back to the old name of inter-secondary games.
Who are you asking?
I'm a former school teacher.
Who are you asking question to?
Well, anybody could answer that, but I would have preferred, maybe Rosie Akbar can do that. On for Rosie.
Thank you. That statement earlier on was very informational. Thank you. Would you like to, of course, be raised?
Thank you for your question. I think that we all have a job to do, and if the people of Fiji feel that that is the best way forward and no other way about it, because I know generations of people have gone through there, and where are we going to get our winners? Anyway, so I think if that's really the way people think about it, then we need to talk about that. You know, I don't believe that we should just cut it. I think it's an important institution. Having attended it last year, and I noticed that there are generations of people that have been involved in that, so that the event in itself, I think, is pretty important, especially for secondary school kids. But if there was a wave, a tide of movement towards looking at the name, then I think that we should do that.
Thank you. Any other comments for the
I think this stems to some concern around more about the event itself, which is great to get children more active, and it's been in place for a long time. It's about the use of that event for marketing of a particular product. Obviously, no single product is responsible for NCDs or obesity, but I think it's about the use of an event to promote a product that is perhaps not something that we should be promoting to children. Of course, they will be drinking it, but we don't need to promote it to that age group. So the event should definitely be continued. I think it's very important.
Thank you, Honorable Vadim.
Yeah, my short contribution to the question is that we need to factor that in our legislation, and also the ministry can take a lead role in conducting consultation. Not only Coke, it's Fiji Games, Fiji Diplomat, those are some of the they can factor those in their policies and regulations and move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the response. You are limited to just one question, one person. Yeah, while we're waiting for another question, or there's
my name is Akash Maharaj. Mr. Walker, I commend you for being here. It must really feel like walking into the lines. But I'm afraid my question is also for you. You gave a very spirited defense of your industry and said that you felt it's necessary to have more and better research into the broad sources of the consumption of sugar by Fijians. You also said that Coca-Cola takes seriously its responsibilities as a good corporate citizen. I'm afraid I'm going to put you on the spot and say, if both those things are true, would the Coca-Cola Corporation be willing to finance such research at Fiji's universities?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know this isn't obvious, but there are two distinct companies. Coca-Cola Amatil is the bottler and distributor, and Coca-Cola that comes from America. So anything that's specific to that Coca-Cola brand is not anything I can answer to. I can answer to what we do and the amazing work we do with our people here.
Thank you. Lamine Kodari, you had your hand.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just need to hear from the panelists. Thank you, panelists, for your information today. I want to just bring up some keywords, which I think I'm asking us, or the leaders that be, to return to basics. And I want to start with sustainability, that's very well known, consistency, coordination. I was glad towards the end I heard Dr. Wilson mention Ministry for Agriculture, one example of better coordination if you're looking at new policies. So on this, I'd like to say that, I come from, I'm not only a nurse, from an NGO background. And I want to say here that there's a lot of resources out there. And Madam Speaker, you started with a statement about raising awareness. And it's lovely to hear that it's beginning from the leaders, raising awareness in this area of NCD. So I'd like to ask, there were programs that the NGOs were running, like, this is why I'm saying sustainability. We need to sustain.
They need to ask your question, otherwise your time will catch up on you.
May I just finish the sentence? The kitchen garden and also breastfeeding in the workplace is not happening as it should. Just maintaining this, following up on it, ensuring that they're happening, and the awareness can be led by the NGOs. There are many out there, especially women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I could just go back to the question about the Coca-Cola games. And I agree with Wendy saying that it's not about the drink, it's not about Coca-Cola, it's more about marketing and selling a product that we know. Although Neil would say that there is little evidence to directly connect A to B. But we know that there are high sugar levels. The sugar content in most Coca-Cola drinks are high. But I think the issue we need to talk about here is how we are promoting and how we are teaching the younger generation with the products that we advertise on television. And that is the more important issue that I think we need to address. So with the Coca-Cola games, the Coca-Cola games mean very much to Fiji, but whether Coca-Cola world continues to support the games, that is another issue. But I think what is behind it is what we put as something that is consumed by the younger children, the next generation of Fiji. I think that is important.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. You wanted to add to?
We have a high percentage of our beverages. We have a considerable number, more than 130 in our beverage portfolio here, and a high percentage of those are no sugar or low sugar. So the objective is to provide consumers with better choice, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Eddie McKay. I'm one of those bad guys who cut off legs for a profession. And, I've been in the medical profession for over 40 years, and I've seen the shape of our people change. And of recent, I walk around the hospital and I'm quite embarrassed the size of our staff in the hospital. Nurses, doctors, etc. I'm quite embarrassed. So about 10 years ago, I introduced a reward system. So we take our weights in the early part of the year, and those who have reduced over 10% of their weight gets a generous Christmas hamper. I've never needed to give this away. My suggestion, since we have some policymakers, all the suggestions have been tried in Fiji, worldwide. None of them have worked, whether it be WHO or whatever. They've even suggested having 5 fruit a day, which is unrealistic. I was watching the BBC News now, the British are recommending 10 fruit a day.
Thank you.
My question is, can we introduce to our workforce a reward system? If you do lose weight, if you do get your health under control, you get rewarded. If you don't, you get sacked.
Any candidates who would like to respond to that? If you have sponsors to provide the award.
Thank you, Doc. I think it's very interesting. I mean, just to get everybody burst into laughter. I know this is not a laughing matter, but the fact that people are responding to these suggestions is indicating that we are all serious. I would suggest not only at the workplace. From the time I took over this ministry, my response has always been individual responsibilities. Too often we are shifting our own responsibilities to other organizations. The government cannot do it alone, our NGOs, our CSOs, our faith-based organizations cannot do it alone. I would like to stress upon families' responsibilities here. What happens within your home, what's cooked within your kitchen, what goes in your shopping basket, I think that's the way to start now. I mean, I always say it's a man-made disaster, like tsunami. Now, Mr. Chen mentioned tsunami. I think we have imposed upon us our man-made disaster that is killing our people by the day, and that's very serious for a small nation like Fiji, where we have abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables. We talked about affordability. Somebody mentioned kitchen. I mean, why can't we grow our own fruits and vegetables? I mean, Dr. Mecca, you are right. We look at the sizes and the shapes of our people have changed. How do we get back into shape? You don't have to go and participate in marathons. We say 10 minutes, half an hour brisk walking. So people need to stop taking risks. We have a lot of risk takers who think, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be me, but here we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. And let's start with families. I mean, as a ministry, as a government, we are here to provide support. But it's high time that every individual started taking responsibility for his or our own health, and especially of the children. There's a lot of mention of the next generation. I'm sure we've lost the cause, but still, there's some hope. And we all need to be beacon of that hope. All of us need to do that. Go out in our communities, our homes, and be role models of healthy lifestyle. Otherwise, we are doomed. I mean, we have to say we are doomed. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Now there's one here in the middle here, on the right. Yes. And then one at the back there, and then another in the front.
Mr. Mulubinaka, I'm Annalise from the Child Benefit Foundation and the Mobile Kindi. Thank you so much for tonight. And the question that I would like to ask is, I've heard about the multi-sectoral approach and also the curriculum that we need to introduce that in the curriculum. And just almost everything I've heard that's highlighted tonight. My question would be that if we are not ending right now, as we all see, that it's a crisis, maybe that we need to look into the way that we begin. Maybe we're not beginning right. And also that I've also heard that how important it is to look and to put out a positive messages to the children. And I know that if tonight, if we can, and I'm not very sure, and the questions that I would like to ask is, is do we have policy that is around the early childhood care and education, the care component? I know that we have policy on the education side, but I'm not very sure that if we do have one in the early childhood, early care and education. Thank you. Maybe to our Honorable Minister, please.
Does anyone have that information, or otherwise from the floor, do we have somebody from the education management staff that could answer that question? No, I'm afraid we do not have. Okay,
Perhaps,
Honorable Minister.
This might be of some assurance. Some examples of the ministry's activities in the area that you have mentioned, especially in terms of combating NCDs. We promote healthy lifestyles in childhood from conception to 18 years through community health workers, through the antenatal clinics that we have, through maternal and child health services and our school health programs. So we do have some policies, and I totally agree that we need to strengthen it. There needs to be more groundwork, more monitoring of these policies. Otherwise, policies will only be good as covering dust on the shelves if we don't put life to it. And that's what we intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Something available.
Okay, I hope I'm loud enough. I'm Luki, I'm a final year pursuing bachelor's in environmental health at the School of Public Health. So after this afternoon, I've heard about social determinants and then the change of type. My question is, what will the government do in regards to, I believe one social determinant is unemployment. And I believe I'm asking what will the government do in regards to unemployment, because I believe the prices for vegetables and fruits nowadays is expensive. First, we resort to noodles, 70 cents. And as we love our extended family, I would ask what is the government doing in regards to us youths after we graduated in regards to unemployment. And of course, we are stressed, that is another social determinant. And in regards to change of diet, what will the government do in regards to prices of vegetables and healthy foods?
Maybe unemployment, maybe that's not relevant to this. Yeah, but the change of diet one, what will the government do to change that? Maybe the Honorable Minister.
Grow your own vegetables.
It's a very, very simple issue. We're living in Fiji, and if you're telling me that the price of vegetables and fruits and vegetables have gone up, it's basically the fact that we're not growing more than what we're supposed to. We need to grow. Okay, we have land available. I think we have commitment from the people, the will from the people to eat healthy. We should be able to produce our own fruits and vegetables, and that will also lead to the availability of these fresh and fruits vegetables being more cheap. Okay, so my simple answer: grow and eat our own fruits and vegetables.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, Dr. Vidula Prasad, I don't want you to feel that he's being shot at all the time, but whether it is the modest bitter sevens, or is it the chow gates or the Coca-Cola gates, as a limit to your corporate social responsibility, would you dare remove your advertising and still finance the games? Thank you.
You really have to Thank you, Mr. Walker.
I can't answer that question. Yeah, I'll definitely take it through. Just to be clear, the Coca-Cola company is one of the most well-known brands in the world. And it's easy sometimes for them to be picked on because of their size and because of what they do. But I can tell you now, I have a close engagement with the Coke company, they're our biggest partner, that they are working hard to do what they can as well to ensure that they're good corporate citizens. They are. But I'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question that has been put through a mobile phone, and it's from William Wonga from the USB London campus. In an effort to tackle diabetes and overweight issues, why isn't government investing millions for better and bigger recreational space to go for walks, cycling, children's playgrounds, gym equipment, and rebates? My super park is a success, but it's overcrowded most of the time. Can government create more parks like the one at Super Point and keep them maintained through special funding through local councils?
Sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer that. We have a Minister for Sports here. Maybe we'd like to contribute.
And this anyone would like to do that? Minister of Sports, would you like to?
Probably I can contribute to that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I did a study whereby I was interviewing a lot of senior management in most of the ministries. It was including local government. I think what they're doing now is try to expand the infrastructure facilities for all the municipalities. So they started now with Suba, as you can see now. And they're hoping to expand that to the west and Nosori. I think one other thing as well is the agriculture, whereby they're expanding the market now, where they're allowing the farmers to come and sell their food, what is fresh from the farm. I mean, that's the only way that that allows for, for those who bring fresh food. One other thing as well from the interview is from the trade. I think that's, from the academia perspective, we see that this is something that we really, because of the import of the food. This is what I find difficult, because I was trying to interview the key person, which is the PS. Unfortunately, they direct me to another one, corporate manager. But what I see in that one is trying to infiltrate on how exactly the government is playing its role in importing the right food for Fiji. I know from the revenue side doing that, we can't deny the fact, but it's very important that this is a multi-sectoral action. And this with a person as well, they'll go to the Minister for Health, because I know that they're working on the NCD strategic plan, and it's reflected there. Most of the ministries are reflected in the ACP on the activity they do. They're supposed to reflect it in the ACP of the individual ministry. But it's unfortunate to see when, during the interview, I didn't see most of those activities reflected in the other ministries' ACP. So it's the lack of coordination coming into the picture now. So I will leave it to the Minister for Health on how her ministry can really put this, if they really want to put it as a multi-sectoral action against this crisis, that they have to play a very proactive role in reflecting to make sure they really coordinate all these activities to all these ministries. I think I've been to 10 ministries, including the finance. And it's said that there's a lack of coordination on this. I can see it on the ground, and probably that is something that we really need to take it from here, that will help. And probably now to Mr. Wata. I think, there was one research, there was one study conducted by Dr. Wendy, I think that was way back in 2010, in relation to the advertisement of junk food and drink. I think that is the impact. It's not what your product is all about, it's the impact of the advertisement on the children, which really changed their preferences and also really changed the nutritional knowledge on how they view. I think that is, and there was one recommendation for a regulatory approach, the need for the government to put up a legislation on that. That was way back in 2010. This is 2017. Nothing is on the ground, so we can still see what is happening. So it's only how we can translate from research to policy, something that academia is really finding difficult. It's a waste of time conducting research when it's not translated into policy. So probably that is the only two things that I want to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to contribute to that issue? Yes, thank you, Dr. Pinero.
Not on that issue, but I noticed that we're talking about junk food and drink. The two drinks that have not been addressed directly are alcohol and kava. I just wonder whether the panel would like to make some comments. So I think these two drinks are much more abused than Coca-Cola.
Yes, we were trying to keep it non-alcoholic tonight, but clearly not. So no, you raised a very important point. I think the focus of tonight's discussion was more on the non-alcoholic and food, but certainly the misuse of alcohol is a substantial issue in the Pacific and in Fiji. And it's certainly creating a lot of social issues and a lot of health issues as well. And it's something that will continue to look at ways to control that problem and to work with communities and so on to try and tackle it. I think for the kava use, the issue is mainly around what people do at the same time as kava, which is that they sit and they don't move, and then they have some wash down, and then a bit of smoke, and then a bit of eating, and then a bit more sitting, and a bit more wash down. And, yes, and 8 hours later, and much food and drink and not much movement. So I think that those are more the issues that we're looking at with regard to NCDs and the need to look at the improving and reducing the frequency of those and the length and what's happening at the same time.
Thank you. Yes, it's the misuse of alcohol. I heard this morning that in Fiji we don't sip alcohol. We call it mara. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sam and I'm a farmer and I can sell and deliver vegetables well at price. I also volunteer with Sodelta, and my question today is to the Minister for Health. I totally agree that it's time that we take responsibility for our own health rather than creating a nanny state where we're told what to do. But also I've lost many family members due to NCDs, and my question is simple. Would you consider a simple outreach program where you get people that suffer from NCDs who have now realized that it's due to their own lifestyle and the way they've eaten for so many years and now have the conviction to get back on track? If you could do a program with them to create awareness to others, because the way they've eaten and lived for so many years is the way so many people in Fiji eat and live today as well. And that way people can, especially in the villages, can see the result of the road that they don't even necessarily know they're heading down on. So if you could do that so that people would learn from the
your question is clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that approach we're already taking with our NGO partners, especially the FSDG and our FPOs, where we reach out to these communities at grassroots levels. It's very important. And we're also considering looking at some sort of serious media advertising where people actually see the realities of what happens when you lose a limb. I mean, those images are not very good, but we want people to see it. And many times people ask me, when is the government going to work towards assisting diabetes patients with dialysis? And one of the things that I want to tell people is dialysis is no fun. Dialysis is not an option for us. So yes, any suggestion that is going to help create awareness, make people really take their health seriously is welcome by the Minister of Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mandi, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, it's very important to capture some of those data and share those information so that we can learn from what people have endured or have encountered during changing their lifestyles. So it's a good suggestion from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody from the list who put that? Yes.
Just one question to Dr. Wilson, Dr. Snowden, and the Minister for Health. We're talking about toughening rules. Have we actually conducted studies that have shown us why we are actually drinking alcohol, why we are binge drinking, why are we eating the wrong foods? I heard Dr. Wilson talk about social determinants tonight. I'm wondering whether any research has been done to address why we are going on with this habit. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Dr. Wilson, and then Dr. Snowden, and then the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Melina. You could have asked me that question tomorrow. Locally, I don't think we have. I think it is something that is taken for granted. It is part of our culture. Sad to say, we love to binge eat, and we love to binge drink. Whatever we do, we binge. But I think I'm not too sure, but if we do dissect this question further, we may see the value in actually doing the research to answer that question. But Madam Speaker, if I could just digress a little bit within that question answer, just make a comment, Professor Rajat's contribution about alcohol and kava. I had done some studies on mice, on animals, about kava, and this is in relation to road accidents. Road accidents do contribute to our NCD statistics, and just attaching electrodes to mice and titrating the amount of kava we give to them. This sort of contributes to maybe the flying Fiji Airways, for instance. They need to make sure that the pilots are flying not high on kava. And this is something that is very real. We have accidents on the roads that we are not sure. A breathalyzer could prove, a breathalyzer could find that alcohol levels are normal, but they could be doped on kava. But so the experimental system that I was developing, I was hoping to take it towards creating an equivalent of the breathalyzer test, but for kava. It's a bit difficult though, because of the experimental conditions to do with kava. And we killed quite a number of rats in the process. But I think we need to see that it's not just the Fijian culture anymore. It's the Fijians of Indo-Indian descent are also doing the same thing. They could drink kava until late hours of the morning. And if I could just add for 30 seconds, a country that I knew never drank kava. My classmate was from Tuvalu. They never drank kava. And then 10 years ago, I find out that people are actually drinking kava in Tuvalu. And this is a sort of a migration of what we do. It's not bad, it's just that we abuse it, and that what comes after it is alcohol abuse, what comes after it is more cigarette smoking, what comes after it is not just first-hand smoke, but second-hand smoke, and all the other risk factors for NCDs.
So certainly there have been some studies done around what's driving dietary practices over a number of years here in Fiji, and it's a mixture. It's not one thing. It's about preference. It's about convenience. It's about accessibility, and it's about price. So those are the main things that come up each time. The studies that have been done in children have indicated that they're very heavily influenced by their peers around them. So if the other cool kids are out eating and drinking it, then they want to eat and drink it too. And they're certainly influenced by their respected elders as well, particularly aunties and grandmas and so on. They're very heavily influenced by those. They're influenced by what they see in the media, and of course by what their teachers thankfully also tell them as well. That does have a little bit of influence with them as well. So it's certainly a combination of things that are affecting what people eat, and that's why we really need a combination of approaches to try and tackle and improve diets.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, we are.
Former school teacher. Madam Chair, thank you very much for the initiative made, whereby the public are here to hear the killer disease which is affecting our country right now. The question is geared towards the Honorable Minister for Health, Honorable Rosie Bulbenak, all the way from Naita City. Leadership is hope and strength to those who think they don't have any. We are quite fortunate that you are here today. Most of the time, I used to see you in the TV and in the newspaper. This is the first time ever to see you in physical as a person. Madam, legislation.
And the question is?
Short question. Madam,
question.
As Minister, as the Honourable Minister for Health, Fiji would like to see the first Iron Lady to stop the increase of this topical disease, diabetes and heart disease. From today's after this session, what will you table in Parliament in order to prevent this?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. As mentioned by the opposition Shadow Minister for Health, we have legislations in place. We have a lot of legislations in place, and I think that my task is now to give life to those legislations. And as the leader of the Ministry of Health and Medical Services in the country, within my remainder of the term, I will strive to see that we monitor those legislations, we put our activities into action, and see how best it can be filtered down to grassroots levels. That I can assure you. Thank you. It's no use making new legislations. Let's work on the existing frameworks that we have and see how best, like I said, give life to those, because it involves all of us. NCD is just not affecting one or two, it's everybody, whether it's your family, your loved one, your neighbor, your child. You can have my word for that. We will be more actively and vigorously working towards implementing those legislations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a gentleman in front here.
My name is Humphrey Cheng, private secretary. My question is really going to be directed to the health minister as well as the Fijian shadow minister, and that is, we talk about nutrition, we talk about health food, we talk about health drinks and so on. A lot of time we want to eat good fruits, and a lot of the time we want to eat good vegetables, but some of these vegetables are not found, are not readily available in the country. They have to be imported. I mentioned the cousin to the cauliflower, I forget the name of the food. But that is greenish food and is the most healthiest food. I happen to be the interim president of the Herbal Association, so I do collect a lot of materials. What I want to ask the Minister for Health and the Shadow Minister is to support a call from the public to allow fruits that are not grown in Fiji or cannot be grown in Fiji, vegetables that are scarce and cannot be grown easily in Fiji, to bring it in duty-free. I know the opposition don't like to support things from the from the ruling party, but do
Thank you. Your question is clear. Maybe other question first. And then
Thank you for that question. There is trade agreements being set, that there are policies being put into place by government. With the import of fruits, there are policies, as already mentioned by government, there are multi-sectoral conventions that we need to put them together so that can be imported at a cheaper price. That can also be done, but it depends on the government. If life is only one, why not? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Minister. Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. I think the Minister of Economy is going around the country conducting his budget consultations. With the next year's budget around the corner, I believe this could be put to him during one of the consultations because he is in a better position to give into your request. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, Maria. Oh, sorry.
Could I just add 2 points? One is that, in fact, the duty on imported fruits and vegetables has been dramatically reduced. It was at 32%, now it's down at 5 or 0% for most fruits and vegetables that are not produced here. That's already been done. The second point is that we do have a lot of really nutritious fruits and vegetables here. There's no reason to bring in broccoli just to get certain nutrients. We have local fruits and vegetables that can certainly provide that. There's no such thing as a superfood. It's about the overall variety that we eat. So of course it's fine to import vegetables to increase the supply and variety, but it's not a requirement to live a long and healthy life that we have some of these imported vegetables.
Thank you. I did call on somewhere a little bit. Okay. Right there, too. There are 3 hands up there, please.
Vinaka, my name is Moses. I'm a USP student at Lodal campus. And due to my knowledge, I know Fiji used to be a healthy place for food and drinks, but has faded away for a short while now. But my question is directed to Professor Wilson, and it goes, what is the role of academia in collecting evidence based to assist the government with its policy and statistics to tackle the issues of NCDs?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I had raised that in my little 7-minute contribution, and as the 4th strategy from the NCD roadmap, our role as an academic institution, I think, is to strengthen the evidence base. And like I also highlighted, we had, well, at least the Fiji National University School of Public Health, we are in collaboration with the Minister of Health, and we are aligning ourselves with the activities and the research priorities of the Minister of Health. So whatever the Minister of Health, Public Health Division finds as important and that needs researching, we fit ourselves into the picture and we facilitate with the research that is needed. So I raised 4 study themes that we've already started looking at, which is one is the knowledge, attitude, and practice related to lifestyle factors that influence food choices. Why do people choose a certain kind of food? Looking at the barriers in the continuum of care for NCDs, and also describing the premature mortality due to NCDs, describing that picture. So that's what we're doing so far.
Thank you. One more. Thank you. With 3 hands up before I turn this back.
Hello everyone, my name is John Philp. I'm a businessman and I volunteer my time for administrating sports, and I sit on the Fiji National Sports Commission. I've been here for over an hour, and the only thing I've learned new today is that the duty on fruit and vegetables has been lowered from 30 to 5%. Thank you very much. I have a 2-part question for the Minister of Health. I was interviewed recently by the UNDP. They have done an extensive study on the cost of NCDs to the Fiji economy. I've had a little bit of experience in this, and I understand it's a huge number. Would the Minister share that? And number two...
No, just one, please. Isn't it just one question from your minister? No, it's that's specific. She doesn't have a cost right now. But can we provide it to you?
Sorry?
She can provide you with information, you know.
Can you share that number with the public minister?
Thank you. You have it?
Right, just to clarify, a study has been undertaken for the Ministry of Health, but that is undergoing peer review at the moment before it's being finalised. So it would be premature to release the figures until they've been further checked by some additional experts.
Thank you. And the third one?
Thank you very much, all the presenters. My name is, I am David from FLU. I want to ask a question relating to other scopes, enlarging the scope of other contributing factors to NCD. NCD is about chemical and clinical manifestation of lifestyle dysfunction. Currently, we have a lot of evidence to show that low physical activity, low cardiorespiratory fitness contributes much more to the pathophysiology of glucose control and NCD. What step is the Ministry of Health taking to enlarge the scope to address some of these issues, particularly physical activity and low cardiorespiratory fitness? And if the Coca-Cola company will be willing to dedicate some funds as part of their social responsibility to research in some of these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, you start a question with what is the Ministry of Health doing? Can you just that one bit.
All right. What is the Ministry of Health doing to enlarge the scope of their efforts to address other factors contributing to this, to NCD? Because we have evidence to show that cardiorespiratory fitness, which is low, and physical activity contributes much more than just obesity and jumping.
Thank you. Okay, anyone would like to respond to that question? Yes.
Madam Speaker, I'm not going to ask a question, but I simply would like to answer that question.
Answer the question that was asked?
Yes, I would like to answer the question that we are asked, written behind you, Madam Speaker. Before answering this question, I think I would like to say that the people of today, in whatever societies they're living in, they are the product of the processes of development of the socio-economic order. Now, you see NCDs in the modern world. NCDs is definitely, arguably, a result of these processes of socio-economic order. Now, I'm 79 years of age. I was working away from this country for the last 20-something years. I was amazed, so amazed. No, I don't feel like saying this, but I must come out of it. Coming back to this country, after being away for more than 20 years, I was so amazed to see the number of young, obese people in my country. Never seen before in the 79 years of my life. Going away, coming back, going away, coming back. But just in this last 20-something years, the number of obese young people in this country is unbelievable.
Your question, please.
And therefore, yes, madam. My answer to the question, without asking a question, is this: go ahead with it. Please do. Go ahead with it.
Thank you.
Right away. Thank you. Mr.
Thank you.
Speaker.
And we will all go ahead. There's a question from the back there. Somebody in the white shirt had his hand up. Was it you? Okay, I'm now focusing on this side of the floor. Yes, lady right there.
Hello. I'm Counselor Sito. I'm an industrial relations graduate from the University of Stockton. And I would like to address a question to the Honorable Honorary Director of the Day. My question is concerning patients. I'd like to ask, have you spoken to the median heart disease patient telling them that he will change their diet and you'll be strict and it's a health policy and you have the right to monitor them to make sure they're cured? Because I think some of them don't listen. The doctors, I think, when they are advised.
Could you repeat the question, please?
But it's concerning patient. I'd like to ask, have you spoken, especially to, I'm actually addressing to the Honorable Honorary Minister for Health and Medical Services, basically patients in Fiji. Have you spoken to diabetic heart disease patients, telling them that they will change the diet, and you have to strict and it's a health policy, and you have the right to monitor their diet to make sure they're cured? I haven't spoken to patients telling them that they change the diet. Because I think some patients, they don't want to see heart disease and diabetes. They tell them you have to stay away from all this kind of sort of food and drink, but they still enjoy eating it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. To be living, you have to follow instructions. Diabetes, if they want to live, they have to follow the instructions from their doctors and the prescribed medicines given to them. That is what I can get regarding diabetic patients.
Thank you. If I could just take off from that question. I think the question was, have you ever spoken to a patient who has diabetes or heart disease and who still smokes and does not do anything about the risk factors? I think a big issue that we need to tackle within the NCD picture is behavior modification. How do you empower a child, educate a child enough to, when you take him or her to the shop, that he or she chooses a cup of pineapple and not a bag of potato chips? And again, I say, when I had delivered my little bit, I think the current generation is a lost cause. We've gone past that age. All we can do is try and run for 30 minutes a day and to keep our cardiorespiratory fitness up to a certain level. But I think the next best thing that we can do is the next generation, which is, I think the Minister of Health is currently with the from the womb to the tomb policy, and that begins from when the woman is pregnant. We can't really change much of the attitudes of patients with NCDs, but I think what we can do is foster more responsible choices in the children that we nurture. I think that's probably the best we can do. And behavior modification is not easy. We have one of that as part of the courses of our Masters in Public Health in NCD, and it's not a very easy thing to do, motivational interviewing. There's another thing that I think is really good piece of advice, which I heard 2 weeks ago. about someone who looked like he never changed, never gained weight over so many years, and was asked, hey, how have you stayed, what kind of exercises are you doing? You stay the same all these years. And he said, I just exercise my mouth. So you just control what you put in your mouth, you should be in good shape. I'm speaking to myself.
That's easy, exercising your mouth is good.
Thank you very much. I think we have a lot of young people here. The generation we are talking about. I believe we still haven't lost you. Okay? I believe you are our hope, and we really need you to be champions of this lost cause that we are talking about. So, you know, younger generations, you have your own mindset, but you are our hope. You are the country's hope, and we look forward for you to take the country forward and get and rid of these NCDs. I think almost everybody that asked the question was, what can the government do? What can the NGOs do? What can Coca-Cola do? What can other corporate bodies do? Nobody has stood up and said, what can I do? Please, my go-home message here would be to just say to yourself when you walk out through this door, what is it that I can do? It's always putting blame on others. Legislations, policies, funding, budgetary, all these things. But please sit back and take a moment of your time and say, what is it that I can do for Fiji? Because this is a disaster that we have made. My generation, the other generation might have made this. But what can you do as a people, as a country, to see how best we can move out? Is it toughening rules? Is it changing mindsets? We've heard that behavior modification is hard to come by. Okay? So start with you, and I'm sure we can be champions of good health for Fiji. Thank you.
I think it's just about making healthy choices, whether that's Coca-Cola or whether that's water. I think it's just about making the right choices at the right time.
Thank you. I think you'll see us to like this.
Good afternoon, my name is Master Sinoli and I'm the Finance and Management Resource Student at USP. You walk into any supermarket today in Suva and you'll be taken aback by how cheap and affordable junk food, fizzy drinks, cigarettes and beers are at these supermarkets. My question to Honorable Akbar, Honorable Vande and Madam Speaker is, are there any plans by government to increase taxes on these NCD causing commodities that are so affordable and cheap nowadays?
I think that over the recent years there have been a number of increases to the alcohol and tobacco taxation rates here, so you can say that they're still too cheap maybe, but certainly the taxes have been going up to try and contribute to reduced consumption, and there have been some measures introduced as well to look at taxing some of the less healthy options to make them less affordable, but I think it's always something that can be looked at. About the pricing of various products, but I would say that a lot of taxation efforts have already taken place.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I do go along with that. There's a lot of taxation being done on those food items plus drinks, but there needs to be good policy and legislation and regulation to be in place so that close monitoring and supervision is what we require so that people do not abuse them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm representing Diabetes Fiji, basically kids who live with diabetes. And
in regards to what we are just discussing about taxation, Madam Rosilpa had mentioned increasing excise duties on carbonated drinks by the government, and I think it's a great incentive. But my request is, if the income that is generated from increase in excise duty should be invested back into NCD operators. It should not be additional form of income for the government, but it should be a healthy tax. It should be back invested into the government, into the economy.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to agree with that.
Please.
Thank you, all the speakers, for such a wonderful debate. And I was just reading the title over and over again, and I was wondering about junk food definition, things like that. But what I wanted to say is that it's not only eating junk food, but eating food in abundance, eating too much, which is the problem with less activity. But my question is to the Honourable Minister of Health, like how Professor Don Wilson said that you are interested from the womb to the tomb. We know that breastfeeding is one of very good ways of addressing NCDs, and I do have a lot of patients who do breastfeed, but then they tell me, oh, I have to go back to work and I have to stop breastfeeding. So is the Ministry of Health doing something about making sure that the women get a chance to breastfeed in any place that they are working? I mean, not only in health facilities, but in banks, in as teachers and other places.
Thank you. I can tell you what I have become aware of in the last 5 to 6 months, and just new to this position. We try to promote mother-safe workplaces, but I'm sure that has not filtered down to all corporate organizations as such. But definitely that is something that we will pursue. My Assistant Minister would like to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if I may, the Ministry of Health, we do have at in Denham House a little nursery for mothers, and they are in the last couple of months there's been 2 mothers who bring their child with their housemaid, and the mothers are able to breastfeed their babies or infants during the term of the day. Thank you.
Are you ready to respond to the same question? Is the same question you're addressing?
New question.
Or not? You had already one question.
But that was a comment, ma'am. Can I ask a question?
Thank you. You have the floor once already. Yes.
That's you.
Okay, after this side, I'm going to shift to this side.
Madam Speaker, and thank you all for the panels. My question is, we've all heard the good things that all the stakeholders are collaborating with, and we all know about the taxes and everything that's put in place, and the encouragement for everyone to take ownership of their health. My question now is it time to introduce health service fees or a health tax? For everyone, I mean, that's the question, to encourage people to take more ownership of their own health. Is it time to introduce health service fees or health tax fees? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The idea behind levying a health tax and for the tax to go into a consolidated fund and used for the health sector. If I'm correct, I've just been given information that we already have a 6% health levy. We already have a 6%. I can't give you a breakdown of that, but I can provide further information should I get this information better. I could have your email and we will forward to that. But I do not want to give information that is distorted. But I just got this information from the Minister of Economy that we have a 6% health levy. Okay, thank you. This side. One.
Madam Speaker, my name is Professor and I'm one of the panelists. My question to the panelists include the policy future for this country, the next generation. Will the government of the day, before the next generation, be able to pass a bill to completely ban junk food, if I have to describe junk food, food high in sugar, fatty oil and salt, sweetened and sugary drinks, and alcohol to be completely banned through advertisement, either through print, audio, or visual, just like what we did in tobacco. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Walker to respond.
No. I think in an ideal world, maybe you could make decisions around that, but personally I think it's kind of difficult if that right is taken away from me. And I suspect other people might feel the same way. It's about our own choices.
Thank you very much. I think we need to draw a line on what we are talking about. Let's not make NCDs a political issue. Okay? It's very important we not make NCDs a political issue. Okay? And banning junk foods overnight is clearly unrealistic because it's going to involve a lot of complex legislations, and then we need to decide the definition of junk food. We need to decide on the definition first, and obviously I can assure you until the next general elections, as long as I am in this ministry, we're not going to jump into conclusions and then making laws and legislations that is going to have a long-lasting effect. We are talking about our people, we are talking about what they eat, we are talking about the health of our people, and that's going to be a disaster if we were to ban these things overnight. Just not very real. Thank you. And then the last one from that.
Thank you. Just into the junk food and drinks that's been coming up. Actually, what people have to be aware that is not junk food intake is not only the main cause of diabetes, but refined food is like noodles, white rice, flour are the major cause of diabetes. Just going through the clinics, our diabetic clinic, most of our diabetic clinic are filled up with people, recipients of social welfare. Just something there is no law. We noticed that these recipients have a basic list that they get from social welfare, and some of the lists are like flour, rice, noodles. And these are the major causes of diabetes. And it can just be modified into brown rice, white rice. Instead of and dal instead of noodles, brown flour instead of white flour.
Thank you. We take note of your suggestions. It was not a question, but thank you. Last person.
Thank you. My name is Alfred, and I work for WWF. This year in June, Fiji is going to be, together with Sweden, co-hosting the Sustainable Development Goal 14 Ocean Conference in New York. At the same time, we'll be hosting, hosting the COP23 UNFCCC. My question is, under the Sustainable Development Goal 14, we have commitments to establish national parks, marine protected areas networks, as well as forest protected areas under SDG 15. And also in the Convention on Biological Diversity, the HE targets. So my question is, how involved is the Ministry of Health, including the private sector, in your participation to ensure that there is strong linkages between those targets that Fiji has committed to implement in terms of the protected areas, and how you can actually support the Fiji government going forward to ensure there's a strong linkages between these protected areas as well as with health, because we know that nature actually encourages, helps to reduce stress, and we can encourage people to actually visit these established parks, and the private sector to actually provide that support in terms of financing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Harris, does anyone want to respond to that? We can pick just one issue. He came up with about 2 or 3. No, we don't have an answer to that, to your question. It's just because it was not very clear and its linkage to the theme of the evening. But thank you. Any others? Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Just a quick question. Maybe we are missing the Minister of Agriculture just to come into the equation. I know that almost all the main stakeholders have been represented, but has there been any strategic work with the Minister of Agriculture, being the minister responsible for food and the future of growing crops and stuff like that? Are there any linkages in any way with the Ministry of Health and the visibility or outreach and just overall the target to address NCDs?
Thank you. I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of collaboration between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture works a lot with the National Food and Nutrition Centre, particularly in terms of food security and increasing home food production and the linkages with home eating and so on. So I think there's very strong linkages between the food production side and also fisheries as well, and also the impacts on health.
Thank you. Time has gone up on us. It's after 7 o'clock. To conclude, I will invite the panelists to make concluding remarks, and call on Mr. Walker to have the floor. Conclude.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want to say that it's been an absolute privilege to be here, to hear your questions and to hear your concerns, and that so many turned out for what is a very serious topic. I appreciate that. I appreciate the questions, except from you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I really appreciate any kind of question, because at the end of the day, it's something someone wants to know the answer to, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to be here to do that. I want to say that we will continue to do what we can to help support and engage with the government when we're able to, because you've got great government here, and also with health bodies and anyone else that it's important to align with. And I just want to say thank you very much again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Two issues I have missed that I thought I should share. One is role modeling. And I would like to apologize on behalf of all the doctors in Fiji that advise you but are smokers. They drink a lot of alcohol, they don't do exercise, they are not small. And the same applies to teachers. When we talk about role modeling, we expect the children that we rear to see us, see the choices that we make, and make the choices for themselves. And I don't know, for us as an academic institution, I don't know really how we can tell medical students or other students that when they graduate, they need to remain a certain size, not smoke for the rest of their lives, not drink alcohol, so that they remain role models. So this is where behavior modification comes into the picture. And that's just one of the things. The other thing I would just like to maybe put it across the floor and to the members of the government that we look seriously at the social determinants of health and how very important a role these play in the whole picture of NCDs in Fiji. Madam Speaker, thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, there are no easy answers when it comes to there's no easy answers for governments when it comes to tackling such NCDs. And given the fact that our numbers are rising and rising and rising, we really need to have, as we said, a coordinated and a multi-sectoral approach. A question was asked, what is the Ministry of Health doing in terms of, with Ministry of Agriculture? Yes, Ministry of Agriculture is looking at food security. Now we are partnering with Ministry of Agriculture to see how food security can also come with nutrition. So those are two things. One is food security, the other one is nutrition, because the whole debate around NCD is eating healthy food. So again, I can assure the public that as the ministry responsible for looking after the health and the welfare of our people, we are very serious, we are committed, and I would like to urge every individual to partner with the ministry and the government when it comes to finding solutions, way forward-looking solutions on a very positive and a very optimistic mindset, because we can tackle this. It's not something we have made it, we can tackle it, and I think that's the way forward. Not putting blame on each other as to why we are here. The issue is we are here. And this is the issue, a very pressing issue for us. So we will need to work together. You can blame Coke all you want, you can blame people all you want. Somebody rightly mentioned, it's overeating, eating something that our body cannot take. And let's admit the fact that we are doing that. We Fijians are doing that, and we need each other's support to combat that. Ministry of Health is very much committed to empowering Fijian state ownership of their own health. So please make the right choice. Make the right choice for you and your family. Make the right choice to be healthy. Thank you.
Just to conclude, there's a question here from Clara and Anthony. What is the health ministry doing in terms of putting money into research and collecting data to why people are choosing junk food over healthy food?
I think this was already mentioned before. The research was conducted, and we are still into the review process. So yes, the ministry is very serious in collecting and analyzing the data as to why our people are eating unhealthy and junk food, and what's the best way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Dr. Snowden.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in this panel, and it's great to see the enthusiasm and interest in this topic area. It's clearly not straightforward to improve diets. It's going to take a lot of action by a lot of people and a lot of support. We need to continue those efforts for sometimes it's not going to be solved overnight, but with everybody's involvement and multi-sectoral approach, whole community approach, I can really see that the dietary change is possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and thank the members of the public for coming forward to show interest in the topic. And I believe that Fiji needs a tougher rules on junk food and drinks, so that we have valuable life and not losing life. That has been described in this event. So thank you.
We'll be advertising here on the next time we have another speaker's debate and the topic. And I really would like to thank you all again for coming this evening. And we've had an enjoyable time here and very informational as well. And just before we finish, I'd like to just ask you again to give a round of applause to all the panelists.